Welcome everyone. Yes, that's me today. I'd like to welcome you all to today's Art Forum. I'll just make a couple of general comments and announcements before I introduce our guest. The first is to tell you, for those of you that aren't regulars, that the Art Forum program is specially put together by the Art Theory Workshop, and Bonita Ely, who's sitting right here, is the person who organises the program. And our initiative has been to have these themed events where the sessions all address a particular theme. What's happening in this first block is it's to do with art and green ethics. And you'll see that we've got an amazing range of speakers, beginning today with Dr. Bonita Ely, but next week we have Senator Bob Brown, and then you'll see the program rolling out over the next few weeks until the teaching break, and it's fantastic. So I hope that you'll all be able to come, and we're very grateful to Bonita for all the work that she's done on that. Now, another initiative is that the Art Forum events are now videoed, which means that you can actually go to the ANU School of Art website and see them again if you want to, or if you miss one, you'll be able to chase it up there. So that's something Richard Blackwell has set up for us, which we're pretty pleased about as well. So hope to see you in here every Wednesday for the themed event, and then every Thursday we'll be having the Fringe Forums, of course, which started last week, and hope that you can follow those through as well. Now tonight, at the School of Art Gallery, we've got an opening of a student who was examined today. That's Sally Simpson's exhibition. And also tonight, 6 o'clock, hope you can be there, because there's an opening in the foyer gallery of wonderful work by people associated with the school. There's going to be a performance there, so you need to really be down in the foyer area around 6, just so that you can have a look at the shows and then be ready for when the performance starts. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest, Bonita Ely, who's flown down especially for the event from Sydney. And Bonita may well be known to you. She's had a fantastically interesting, rich, diverse practice over many years, beginning in 1972. And she's going to be talking about her work. It spans all sorts of areas: urban interventions, sculpture, photography, performances, painting, image and text, printmaking, video and drawing. So there's not much else that you could add to that. Now, Bonita, she has managed to combine this incredible practice with her teaching and her professional commitments at COFA in Sydney. She's head of sculpture, performance and installation, and she's also in charge of the postgraduate program up there. So we're very pleased.
Just the School of Art.
Oh yes, I just meant the School of Art. So would you please join me in giving Bonita a very warm welcome. Thank you, Bonita.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. Okay. Art and green ethics. I think for me, the ethical aspect of my work hasn't actually been anything that I've thought about in those terms. I think the ethical considerations are something that are perhaps so woven into the fabric of the ideas and the materiality, if you like, of the work that it's never sort of reared its head as a big issue. But also, I think, as an artist, I'm contemplating issues to do with environmental ways of thinking and my relationship to nature, how I approach our embeddedness, if you like, into our environment and how we impact on the environment. All of these questions are something that I've been thinking about deeply all of my life, perhaps. Even as a child, I was very conscious of the beauty of the environment. But I'll talk to you about that a little bit more later on. I recently finished a PhD on the influences of Taoist philosophy and cultural practices on contemporary art practices. And so I couldn't resist putting that little quote in from the Tao Te Ching. Heaven and earth are like a set of bellows. Although empty, they are endlessly productive. The more you work them, the more they produce. And I think you could probably substitute the word art making for heaven and earth and say art making is like a set of bellows. Although empty, it is endlessly productive. The more you work, the more it produces. I say to my students in the sculpture, performance and installation area that our motto is making art makes art, which is a really dumb thing to say, but what I mean by it is that the more you make art, the more ideas and inspiration and motivation you get, and so you're endlessly productive. You know, you've got volumes of journals full of ideas in case one day you might hit a brick and not have an idea. Anyway, let's proceed. This work was perhaps the first work that I made that was overtly environmental. It was made after I'd lived for some time in London and New York, both very urban places. And having been brought up in the country, in the Mallee, you know, I have a very kind of didactic part of myself where I feel so much at ease with the natural environment and just being, you know, a person out in the bush. At the same time, I absolutely adore living in the city and all that brings to me. But I was very much conscious when I was in London and New York of the impact that we were having on the environment in the 70s. And so I was thinking about if we were to make a mythological beast now, what life form would we combine the human being with? And I figured that the locust was the most appropriate. And so here they are in their living room. You can see that they're watching something very, very intently. It's a television set, and it has the sunsets over the Statue of Liberty. I had a studio that overlooked the Statue of Liberty at the time. And here they are romancing, as you do. And there's the Statue of Liberty in the background and one of the extraordinary sunsets that was an outcome of all the pollution that was in the air at that time. And you'll notice in all of these scenarios that they're surrounded by representations of nature, the floral wallpaper, the couch that's like a landscape, the fake grassy-like floor, and so on and so forth, all indicate that we love to be surrounded by nature, but we have this exploitative attitude towards it. I came back to Australia in 1975, and one of the things that knocked me out about coming back was being back in the Australian bush again. And I wanted to go somewhere that I had absolutely no emotional affiliation with whatsoever, to kind of observe in myself what nature was to me. And my partner at the time and I went for a bushwalk up into the mountains, and I'm definitely not a mountain person. I'm a flat earth, desert kind of gal, having come from the Mallee. So it was a very alien environment for me, and I took my camera and took 5 million photographs, including photographs of the panoramic view from the top of Mount Feathertop. When I came back to the studio with all these photographs, it was the panoramic view that really captured me. So I went up the mountain again and again and again during spring, summer, autumn, winter, and took the panoramic shots and then threaded them together and did these drawings from the photographs, and also made this model of the mountain from a contour map to kind of explore exactly what it was I'd responded to and exactly what that mountain was in terms of the way that we represent our environment. In other words, you know, we want to know everything about it as long as it's of some advantage to us, whereas the artist is responding to the aesthetics of the situation. So it started a fascination for me in cartography, in that cartography is a visual way of capturing the human orientation to landscape. Also, coming back to Australia after being away for so long, I started to remember my childhood and had a great deal of connection still, as I do now, to the place where I was brought up. And one of the things we used to love doing when I was a kid was making cubby houses. And I spent a whole lot of time with some children in the Northern Territory in this school where I was the artist in residence. And I took photographs of every single kid I was working with so that they would be motivated to make a self-portrait. And so I had all these beautiful photographs of children's faces. So they were on the inside of the cubby and on the floor, which was covered in a grey army blanket. Now, I don't think you guys are the right demographic to know the significance, the deep significance of grey army blankets. I bet every soldier from the Second World War took home with him a whole bunch of grey army blankets. They was kind of ubiquitous. And so they have this resonance, emotional resonance. And there was a huge jam pan of honey inside. So inside the cubby house, there's this lovely sweet smell of honey as well. And the installation, or whatever you'd call it, was called HQ. So it was a celebration of Australian childhood at that time. And the other thing that was going on in the 70s was a growing awareness in Australia of the environmental impacts of irrigation, deforestation, and rabbits and European carp and all those kinds of pests on the environment that I was brought up again. I was brought up on the Murray River. I don't know where the idea came from, actually, but I had this idea to do a performance where I made Murray River punch, and the ingredients were all the pollutants that were going into the river. So tons of salt. At that time, sewage was going into the river, so I had a very nicely presented turd on a butter dish, and so on. And it all went into this extraordinarily awful, stinking, smelling, putrid mixture, which stunk out the whole of the Melbourne University Student Union building. And then afterwards, which you could never do now, and I can prove that from my experience.
You'd never do it.
I handed it out to everyone, and you can see how delighted they were to partake of the punch. And later I did it again in Adelaide, in Rundle Mall, which I doubt I would ever be able to do now, and I'm sure you all realise why. But look, my work isn't all kind of this heavy, you know, stuff. I do also have fun, and this is a piece that I did in Mexico, in Baja California. My partner and I were camped on this beautiful beach that was entirely composed of these long, thin rocks that were very hard rock, maybe granite, and, you know, had been tumbled back and forth and turned into these beautiful cylindrical stones. And the rest of the geology there was this kind of shaly, very febrile rock. And I spent the whole day taking rocks up the top of the hill, go down, get more rocks, up the top of the hill. This is what I call having fun, everybody. And in the end made this sort of pattern or drawing, really, with the rocks on the top of the hill, where the rocks kind of go like that, and then they part around and come around like that, and then join up and go forward again. And for me it was a sort of a symbol of the relationship that I was in at the time, that we were both together and individuals. And the next piece I'd like to talk to you about became a series to do with the dog woman. This is in the 80s, when feminism became a much more kind of intellectual pursuit, and there was a lot of discussion about how women had been left out of history. And I was determined to put women back. And so I invented the mythical cult of the dog woman, and I found evidence of this religion of dog woman everywhere, and it became very clear to me that it was the first religion that human beings had. This woman here was a great inspiration to me, with her little pooch in the handbag on the Autobahn. All of this was researched in Berlin, and here's an account of my research for it. I'll just read a little bit. Arguably, she has established that these contain a predominance of animist or pre-Christian imagery of the female of both species, with significant statistical weight favouring the female canid, colloquially known as the bitch. Further, the origin of a significant proportion of Christian imagery may be traced to the iconography of this ancient belief system. So there I am giving the dog woman lecture. Ely, on the Danish lecture circuit, demonstrates the hirsute garb typical of the dog woman priestess. And beside that, Grotto de Bonis, Joseph in the Doghouse, 1336, showing 5 female dogs. Okay, so it's a bit of I did all these kind of spiffs on how art practice has kind of been squeezed into the university research mould. That was just a little side thing. And the lecture went something like this. Etc. for about 20 to 30 minutes, while I showed all of these images of the dog woman. The painting is a self-portrait, dog woman with cat. And the artefact is actually dug up in Samaria, proving that, yes, the dog woman was the earliest, yes, blah, blah. Yes, and here's Romulus and Remus. All of these images, by the way, were taken in Berlin collections. They have collections of artwork from all over the world, plus things like this taxidermied pet dog, the woman with her absolutely hideous coat. Oh my God. This is the dog pet cemetery in Berlin, and so on. So, yeah, so that was the dog woman thing. And I guess the subtext of it is that we identify with other species, we form these extraordinary relationships with other species, we project all kinds of qualities and so on onto other species. And at the same time, we feel that we're in some way superior to other species, that we're separate, that we're not part of the animal kingdom, we're somehow elevated above it. Whereas, in fact, it's my belief that, Homo sapiens are animals like everybody else, it's just that we're a bit different, just as they are. Okay, so let's move along. The next large piece that I made ended up being called "We Live to Be Surprised," because I heard a politician say it on the radio, and I thought, oh my God, what a thing to say. And it's an installation in 3 parts. Unfortunately, I've only got images of 2 of the parts. The other part was a corridor that I just illuminated with very strong yellow light. So you went from a room with these red thunderbolts coming up out of the earth through a sort of yellow zone and into this room that had what looked like towers that were falling apart in there, and these little creatures called snabbits, which were a combination of snails and rabbits. And I wrote a story about how, it was a futuristic story about how they ended up being the only creatures left on Earth, and they were genetically engineered during the 21st century as food for the huge population of humanity, and they were great because they couldn't run away, and they tasted a little bit like rabbits and a little bit like snails, etc. So oftentimes I love to write, so oftentimes there's a narrative story behind my work that the work doesn't depend on, but I kind of amuse myself with it, I think, more than anything. But on the other hand, I think I'm inherently a storyteller. I think my work is very much narrative-based. Now, I don't know whether you remember this, but in 1993, there was 400 kilometres of blue-green algae on the Darling River. And I thought, I've got to see this. So I jumped in my car, drove to the Darling River. In the meantime, we had rain like you wouldn't believe, and all the blue-green algae was dispersed. And the river was almost in flood, it was right up to the brim. So I camped on the side of the river and went into town and bought myself a lilo. Remember lilos? And that was my canoe up and down the river, and took photographs, did drawings, blah, 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 and just kind of got into the zone of what this place was like. I was camped just outside of Brewarrina. And within, I think I was there for about 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks, the river had just dropped, back to being a fairly small trickle. Now, this is a phenomenon in Australia because our continent is so flat. you wait, all of this rain, flooding water that we've got will slowly ease its way down the Murray into the sea. Everything will be flushed out and it'll be a good thing in the end. But what I noticed at Bawarrina was that the water was also being pumped furiously for the cotton industry. And so I made this installation where I had a scissor lift, not a sugar lift, a scissor lift, and put a flood line all around the inside of this abandoned derelict building in Melbourne, and made little puddles in the floor of it. So it looked like the thing had been flooded and then the whole water dispersed. This is a piece I did in Los Angeles where I noticed near where the Australia Council Artists in Residence building was that there was this tiny little fragment of the railway line that had been a very efficient public transport system in Los Angeles before cars took over. And there were rumours that, you know, the car manufacturer had encouraged the closing down of the transport system. And there were lots of people at that time living in the streets. I think there must have been some kind of economic downturn or something like that in the early 90s. Anyway, there were a lot of homeless people. So I made this lovely garden for them because I found all of this shag pile green carpet on the pavement. Someone had decided they didn't like it anymore. So I chopped it all up and integrated into the railway line as a kind of homage to this little bit of history. And the very next day, you can see at the back there, these guys came along and ripped up the railway line to extend that car park. Yep, that was amazing. And at that same time, in 1994, during my residency, there was a huge earthquake. It was absolutely traumatic. Avoid earthquakes if you can. They're really something, I tell you, because you absolutely, you know, we subconsciously believe that the earth is stable, and when it does its thing, oh my God, it's really the most shocking and traumatic event. And so I made this work that's sort of like a cathartic expression of the earth in turmoil, but expressed in a way that's calming. This is energy kind of pouring down out of the fixtures in the architecture onto the floor. You can see there's a crack going across the floor that I filled with salt, which is probably very naughty of me actually, as a kind of healing thing. You know how salt traditionally is seen as a healing material. And I cast all of these tools and toys in a bed of salt. So I made a wet bed of salt and pressed the objects down into the salt and then poured the plaster into that. And the plaster crystallised with the crystalline salt, because they're both crystalline, and made these kind of like, relics or ghosty kind of pieces. And they were in a wedge shape that had come adrift. And there was tissue paper also on the floor with these lumps of salt. And it kind of linked into this thing of the railway line, harking back to the work that I'd done on the railway line, but also to road systems and so on. But when people walked in there, I paid particular attention to how I articulated the space to make the space very kind of energised, in this very strong, cathartic kind of way. So when you went into the room, you felt energy. And people said to me that it really helped them come to terms with what an earthquake is, that it's a natural thing, that it's not, a punishment from above. It's something that happens and we have to understand it. The next work is called Juggernaut, and it's these huge spirals kind of cleaving through the space of the gallery. And it was an outcome of researching the way we inscribe landscape or our country with narrative. And I went to India and went to Hampi particularly, places where these grand narratives of the Hindu religion are kind of inscribed on the landscape, and of course the Aboriginal culture's inscription on the landscape. What I was interested in was not just that the landscape is laced with all of these stories, but what the kind of practical function of these stories might be in terms of orientation. One of my colleagues who occasionally works here, Nolene Lucas, and I went on a trip with the women elders in Warburton, and they showed us how you can orientate in the landscape even if you haven't been there for 25 years. You can still find a place because you know the story, yeah? So you follow the story through the landscape to find your way. You don't need roads. So this piece, Juggernaut, was a kind of symbolic, if you like, representation of the way we weave these narratives through the landscape. The plywood spirals were kept in place with wedges in the side. I don't know whether you can see anywhere where the wedges are. Oh, you can see them there. See these wedges? They stopped it from rolling. And these kind of shapes kept the turns of the spiral apart, and each time the spiral turned, the interior space changed to a different shape, all of it based on an improvisation on the circle. So the whole thing was a kind of ephemeral improvisation on travelling through space. I was invited in 1998 to go to Hue in Vietnam to make a public sculpture, and in my research of the culture there, I was absolutely delighted by these fabulous haystacks that they make from the harvesting of the grass from the rice harvest. So they harvest the rice and they've got all of this straw, and they build these amazing conical haystacks and all the grass kind of leans up against these poles of bamboo, and the grass isn't for animals to eat. It's for making fires for cooking. So the rice harvest provides the family with the fuel to cook from for the whole year. And so they pull the rice out, the grass out from the bottom, and finally it starts to make this beautiful mushroom shape. And finally, that gets too fragile and the whole thing kind of slips down the poles, and then they start again pulling out the grass just in handfuls to cook the meals. And so it's the most gorgeous shape out in the paddocks. So mine is hollow, and you can go inside it and look up, and you can see these little openings in it. When you're inside and look up, the whole thing is filled with bands of light being let in through those little holes. And I went back there again last year, and this is what it looked like after so much time had passed. The blue colour had faded, and it was just magic the way the thing has taken on a life of its own because of the very tough, I'd say, climate in Hue. And this little crazy little creature was living in it, So the thing has taken on a life of its own, and it's in the playground of one of the cultural centres for children, where they go and learn martial arts and singing and painting and all that kind of stuff. And they go and play in it, and there's all sorts of inscriptions of so-and-so loves so-and-so. I'm sure that's what it says. Again, this is a research of a place that I knew nothing about when I went there, and that's Salt Lake City. I was invited into a show of a survey of Australian installation art at one of them at the big Mormon university there. So I kind of got saturated in the Mormon religion and kind of ethical fabric that they live their lives in, and also the impact that the Mormon religion has had on the kind of landscape all around, because they've renamed all of the landmarks and so on with religious names. And I was sitting in a meeting with people organising the show, just kind of staring out into the distance, probably daydreaming and not listening to a word they were saying. And I noticed that there's this shape up there on the hill that looks like a bonsai tree, right? And also I was exploring around the town and took photographs of all these funny little quirky things that I found. And I loved this thing of the fire thingy talking to the rock in a car park. So when I went back to Australia, I made all of these tiny little things, little cardboard objects, like point-of-sale objects, and made them into a landscape where, if you looked at the landscape from one side, you could see all of the images, and as you walked around it, it changed until when you got around the back, you couldn't see any images at all. So the thing kind of, from one side was a very animated landscape, but from the other side it was just a facade. And up on the stairs, where are we? Up on the stairs you can see two monitors, and one of the monitors had a live feed onto that bonsai-like shape on the mountain, and the other one was tracking how that landmark changed through the course of one day. So I started off before sunrise and took 15, I think it was, let me think, maybe 30 seconds of footage of it every 15 minutes, something like that. So it was sort of like a live time-lapse video of what was happening out there in one day, one particular day, with the changes that were actually happening on the day you were there. And the sound piece that went with it was a direct feed from the airport's air control tower. Can you imagine them allowing me to do that now? Oh, right, okay. So I've been back to Hay a few times. This one is painted with photovoltaic paint, so it glows in the dark. And I became interested in sustainable energy and how one could use sustainable energy as a way of animating artwork. There's my dog, who's actually capable of running, very simple machines due to his kelpie energy. And this is the public artwork that I made to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the Sydney Olympics. And at night it was illuminated by a solar array, and in response to how much energy people were using in the neighbourhood, the thing changed colour. So if everyone was being very good and nice citizens, it would be green, and it went through yellow. And if they all had, everything going full bore, it turned red. That's what it looked like during the day. And you can see the base. It's sort of like an appliance. It's completely self-sufficient. All of the electronics were run from those solar arrays on the base. Now, I became interested again in the Murray in 2007, because it was 30 years after I'd done that first work on the Murray. So I decided I'd do the Murray River Punch again, but introduce all of the ingredients that you'd put into it now, including locusts and blue-green algae and so on and so forth. And instead of ending up with a drink, I ended up with a paste, because there wasn't really enough water to make a drink. So, yeah, that was fun. But what I'd done in 1977 was take a trip right along the Murray and documented examples of the geology, the geographical changes that the river goes through. This is a sandbar called Boundary Bend, believe it or not, and a very original name. This is, and so I revisited those places and added in more places where the river was particularly degraded at that time. This is in the Barmah Forest, where the riverbanks, which should be really crisp clay, it was just mush. This reminds me of Drysdale's drover's wife. This is, some farmer very industriously putting out irrigation pipe. You can see the little truck way off in the background. This is one of the lakes where people had for years practiced their golfing drive, and so there were hundreds upon hundreds of golf balls out there. This reminded me of the Ents, in Lord of the Rings. And this is, some wags put these little signs up. This is up in the headwaters of the river where it starts off. So that's the Murray up in the mountains. And this was a particularly breathtakingly awful yet extraordinarily beautiful place called Bottle Bend, where the water had turned this piss colour with this gorgeous kind of crust that was salt on everything. And this was probably the drought at its worst, where Lake Alexandria was just a dust bowl on one side, with the Coorong being held back by the barrage. And then, of course, we got rain, didn't we? So I went and took photographs of the floods where they were at their worst near Kerrang. And, yeah. Okay, then because I was doing all this stuff on the Murray, I'm sure, I was invited to document the Georges River for a show called River at the Campbelltown Cultural Centre. And the Georges River, as you all might know, is adjacent to coal mining. And so the coal mining has the most awful impact on the river, including they put these tunnels underneath the river, and instead of leaving the tunnels intact, they get the last little bit of coal out by carving out the columns that are holding the tunnel in place. And over time, because there's nothing to support the earth above, the tunnels collapse and the river bed subsides. So you get these, oh, that's my phone, sorry about that. So here's photographs of the, it's very persistent, isn't it? Photographs of the mining. And I had a lot of fun with this. I made a little PowerPoint. Look, I'll just let you see some of it. I don't think we've got time to watch all of it. But this is Chook Woman, and she's a very colourful local celebrity. She takes people on guided tours of the Cook River and shows them the beauty of the place. And yes, it's all very pristine and gorgeous. Early morning dew on the beautiful spider webs. Yep. She's wearing her best polka dot bikini. Okay, so that's a little bit of the PowerPoint of Chook Woman. So Chook Woman became the kind of substitute for us, I guess, in a lot of the photographs that I took of the mines, and I loved doing that. She was so horrible, so misogynist, but she seemed like a great exemplar of who we are and what we do and how we think. Now these last images are an ongoing project that I've had going for years and years in this beautiful pristine place on the south coast, where the family's been going camping and staying every Christmas for probably about 28 years. And every time I go there, we shake hands with the wallaby again and make our acquaintance with the goanna. And I go out with my sumi brushes and my paper and ink and do these representations of the landscape. And it's sort of like a time-based painting or drawing project that I've very much enjoyed doing over all those years. This one here was when the rain came and the bush came back to life. This one was a time when there were hundreds and hundreds of little, oh heavens, you know, the little, what are they called? No, the little flat, this shaped fish.
Stingray.
Stingrays, yeah. Hundreds of stingrays in the estuary. So there's the stingrays. And this is one of the most recent pieces I've done. It's out at Sydney Olympic Park, and this gentleman's about to ride his bike through a rampart around the building where the exhibition was held in the armoury. So this great rampart around the building was to protect from an explosion if the armoury blew up, you know, because they're full of ammunition and bombs and stuff. And what I loved about the tunnel was that it was so resonant. And right next door is this beautiful, pristine environment that you're only allowed to go into if you've been inducted. It's that precious. And it's full of all these gorgeous frogs who, you know, make a total racket all day long and into the night. So, is it going to make the sound? Come on, you're supposed to make a sound.
I don't think we plugged the sound cable in.
Oh, never mind. Anyway, I recorded the sound of the frogs. So when people went into the tunnel, they got a blast of the frog sound as they went through. And that's the sound gear you can see hitched up on the side there. And I spent quite a lot of time in the back in my studio painting sticks white. That was fun. And making this kind of artificial halo across where the reverberating frogs were going through the tunnel. So the white twigs across the top were sort of like the sound waves of the frogs underneath. And that's a lovely shot of how it looked some days. Okay, so that's pretty much it, folks. Thanks very much.